Hi everyone, I'm Jo Allsopp, artist and author of the book Loose and Lively Animals, with another book coming out soon. I was delighted last year to be at the stand with Search Press, my publishers, where I performed some demonstrations live, and so one or two of you may have seen how loose and lively I do work. So I've been asked to do a video for you, which I recorded a couple of days ago. And whilst it only took me a couple of minutes to do the flower, I'm going to take you through the process step by step. Not only that, I'm going to give you tips and advice on how to loosen up your skills, and so I do hope you enjoy my way of painting. Here we have a gorgeous photograph sourced from Pixabay, copyright free, of which I have decided not to include much of a background. And I've deviated from the aperture being landscape and altered to portrait, as you can see. So I've decided as well not to include any background on this particular flower, just to give the flower pride of place. These are the materials I usually use, and that's Bockingford St Cuthbert's Mill cold press paper 300 GSM, along with my signature paint set, gum tape, my brushes, my favourite colours are in the set that's done by Schminker, available with Cass Art. And then I have the brushes Squirrels, size 3 and 0, and then a miniature one there by the SAA, a rigger size 0. The colours used for this project are Vanadium Yellow, Vermilion Red, Rose Madder, May Green and French Ultramarine. Then I use my board to secure my piece of paper, so as long as you've got watercolour paper, it really doesn't matter what surface you're using, but I always like to gum it to a board due to the fact that I use so much water. Very, very wet on wet, very loose, and so I do prefer to secure mine to a board. I do get a lot of cockle even with the £140 paper. I can use thicker paper, of course, but I do like some of the patterns that are created whilst it stretches itself on the board, with the ebbs and flows and the wells that are created as it starts to stretch and secure itself back down flat. So that's the whole process. That's why I need to do this. Don't have time to stretch paper anyway, but I found that I did like the patterns, so that it does work for me. With teaching every day, this is the preferred method. So you have 4 pieces of gummed tape. Brown gum tape is the best. It's shiny on one side, matte on the other, and it's very, very strong. Once dry, it grips the paper to the board. I can wash my painting under the tap should I want to, if I feel I've overworked it. And the board being marine ply allows me to do this without it bowing or doing anything like that. So I have specially made boards by my husband, marine ply. 2 pots of water always, and I'm showing you now the line of which I've gone half and half on the paper to the board ratio. That's to allow the paper to stretch and not throw that tape off, and at the end we cut it along the line of the paper. So just starting with an initial sketch. This takes me less than a minute. I try and advise my learners to be as fast as they can with the sketch. That way it's not too contrived, not too controlled, and therefore not making us want to paint all that detail that we've drawn. So if you've got a light sketch and a loose and lively sketch, of course, you will maybe follow that way of working with the paint. So you can hardly see the sketch at all. It's just with a HB pencil. And before I do the wax, I want to close in and show you a close-up of how limited these strokes are with the pencil sketch. So just going to the close-up, we have a blank piece of paper. Never be frightened by a blank piece of paper. If you're doing a sketch, it can be rubbed out, started again, but I'd rather rectify my loose sketch than rub out and start again, because often we just put the lines back in the same place. So I'm just literally looking at the poppy, not to copy the poppy as such, but just to get the idea of how the petals are not uniform at all, how sometimes some of the petals are shorter because of the way they're leaning forwards, but I have improvised in putting more of the grasses and stems flowing into an area whereby I think it might need a little bit more life to it. So here goes the wax, just an ordinary piece of candle wax, and I'm just stroking it on random really. I do like to consider-ish where the light might be, but I'm not governed by it completely. I break all the rules. I like to just do my own thing. I'm picking up with the daddy brush, that's a size 3 squirrel, and I'm liberally plonking water onto the flower head. And there I'm dropping in my beautiful vermilion red. And I'll add a touch of the rose madder as well for some more depth, but I'm helping it where it's spread quite easily with the water. I am helping it to the edges and pushing in some darker pigment as well. Leaving white, even though I've resisted some of the paper, the white of the paper with the wax. So I've got plenty of sparkle, but I don't fill all the gaps either. Clean your brushes out thoroughly. And then we're going for the mummy brush, that's the size 0. And dipping into the water to allow me to pick up the May green. Not holding the brush too tight so that I can use my shoulder, hand, wrist, all of my arm really to float in that beautiful colour, moving the strokes randomly, touching, lifting, washing out my brush before I use the rigger. I can use the May green now for the centre of the poppy, and then I'm going to pick up French ultramarine and tap that in all of the May green. So the centre, the stem, the leaves, so that that mingles and mixes on the paper because it's still very, very wet and working ever so quickly. And so I've used the brush on its side as well to get some different variations of strokes for a little bit of interest. And now you see the beautiful vanadium being dropped in. And as it has been plopped in as well with the red, that will mix naturally to an orange. And then I'm unifying the painting by allowing this yellow as well to be touched into the painting elsewhere. Spattering as well. Sometimes if you want looser spatters, you could use the opposite arm where you've less control. And you could do the yellow, you could do the red, you could do any colour you like, but it just adds a little bit of interest and loosens the whole painting up. We're going to the finishing touches now. I have the reds again, strengthening the reds, and I'm deciding to curl out a few of the petals to give a little bit more shape and definition and a little bit more strength. Some of the strokes in there that I can see separation of petals, but not too much, not too defined, and certainly is still very, very wet. Hitting the dry in part. This is a close-up of the whole process again so that you can see quite liberally where the wax is being placed. No plan necessarily. Just where I think there might be a nice bit of texture could be created on the leaves or the petals. And so there's the big daddy brush. Plenty of water. It's not very clear at the moment, but when you see the red drop in, you can see how very wet that is. Look at that pattern. You can't get that wet on dry. And so it does touch towards the dry edges. I've only wet so far. Sometimes I'll mess the whole painting up and wet to the poppy with clean water, but on this occasion, I've used the poppy as a little bit more of a vignette. Strengthening the reds. So I've got my vermilion in the Schminker set, sold by Cassart. That's Jo Allsopp signature set of colours, just my favourites really. And I always replenish like for like, so when I'm running out, that's what I'll do, is order myself some new pans, or half pans they are. You see the beautiful May green, I love this colour. If you haven't got May green, you could use an alternative green and add yellow to it to brighten it up. And then I like to strengthen the green by adding French ultramarine. So I'm just using the tiny rigger just to get the May green in the centre first. And then I don't wash the brush and pick up the French ultramarine. No point in washing the brush because it's going to mix on the paper anyway, so therefore it just seems futile to me. I'm a bit of a dirty person there. I don't mix the colours, by the way, so that you see on my palette is where I've picked up too much pigment. I get to feel the too much pigment on the brush and I just wipe it off onto the palette to use another day so as not to waste those vibrant colours. As it's artist quality paint, I don't want to wash it away and waste it. So the vanadium yellow now being stroked in. Can you see how I use the side of the brush? Random strokes, dry brush technique, little bit of wet on wet, wet on dry, and then letting the yellow run into the red so that we get a nice orange colour mix on there before I do the spatter. So tapping the brush, getting some variations of sizes. You could always lift them off should you not like where they've been met on the paper. Lifting out technique. You can always usually go back to the cleanness of the paper if you're careful. And so, as long as it's not a staining colour, of course. And there's the red going in just for the extra touches and just to give and denote those petals. And there we have my poppy. And here is a close-up of the background, the blooms that we've created by keep re-wetting an already wet surface of paper. As it starts to dry, get those gorgeous, gorgeous patterns. You can see the dry brush there with the yellow. You can see pencil marks, of which I don't mind, loose and lively. The clue is in the titles. Hope you've enjoyed this. Now for a nice cuppa. Thank you for watching.